Hello, class. I wanted to show you this drawing that's up on screen that I recently completed. I think it's a nice drawing, and I want to talk a little bit how I completed it. And this drawing, interestingly done, it's primarily composed in Photoshop with a lot of Illustrator work, which is how I draw a lot. I want to note that really there was no stylus used in this drawing or anything like that. It's all used from actual shapes and tools and things like that in Illustrator and Photoshop, which is a little unique, and I'll talk more about that at the end of the video. I could show you how to draw it from start to scratch, but that would take a long time. Instead, I thought just an overview of how I got this effect in Photoshop would be good, and the theory of how I sort of came to drawing like this. And really, before I get into this, it really is a summary of various drawings I've been experimenting with for a while. And I'm sure I have videos on these on my YouTube channel, which you can check out. But I just want to sort of review them quickly. You know, a year or two ago, I have this video, or I did a video of this drawing. And this is a nice drawing. You know, the intent of this work, and a lot of the work we'll see, is that I want to create a computer drawing that was editable. Almost everything here is actually from Illustrator. But it had the textural quality starting to get of a hand drawing. So I want it to look like a computer drawing, which it does, but start to get that hand sort of quality look. And it does. It does that pretty well. I do like it. It won some awards and things like that, and so it was a nice project. After I did this drawing, for the same competition, the next following year, which I did not win for, I submitted this guy. And I was trying to go in a different route here. I had two ideas. This is almost all Illustrator work that you see in front of you, and I use scripts to generate a bunch of random lines. You can see it most clearly in the people, how they have those lines all over the place. But even the background, trees and mountains, the sort of reflection in the windows of the horizontal blue lines in the sky, all of those were actually generated through scripts that created a bunch of lines. And so part of that was to try to use a bunch of lines to start to create this texture in a different way. Again, create a computer drawing, but capture texture of hand drawing. It's not as nice as the first one, but experimentally it was more interesting. I had the hope of maybe being able to even actually print this out on like a pen plotter, because since it's all just straight lines for the most part, I could do that. I haven't done that yet. I need to get a pen plotter, but I think that's sort of an interesting take, and you know, how pens might react to paper could be an interesting further take on this. You know, at some point in time, I think I have a video on this one too. I sort of experimented with watercolor effects. This is all also done primarily in Illustrator, even though I'm in Photoshop right now. And it was sort of using Illustrator tricks to sort of start to affect an image of how something looks like in watercolor, which is clearly the latest image I'm showing you. And it's good. I like it. It's not a perspective like the other one, so the image isn't quite as dynamic. But even the watercolor itself, while nice, it doesn't quite have the real subtleties and contrasts that I was really looking for. Plus, I really lacked any control over it, just because I had to use filters and I had some control over that. But fundamentally, you know, I had to work well within the parameters that Illustrator gave me. And so I was thinking before I did this latest video here, or this latest drawing, that what if instead of starting with just Illustrator shapes and Illustrator filters, I start with the lines. I start at this point for a drawing. So use the random script generators to create a bunch of lines that start to give me some textural quality to it, and can have real variation, and I can control it because it's from a script, which I'm not going to show, but you know, there's all these parameters which I'm free to control and experiment with. And then on top of that raw sort of vector work, I then apply the filters and other techniques that we see like in this drawing or in this drawing. So combine both of those two ideas together for a more complete look. And that's basically how I came up with this drawing. So, and I'll show some of the steps here in between, but this is a lot of script generated line work that has some random functions in it, aligned with filters in Illustrator, but primarily Photoshop. I ran a lot of my filters and then composed it together to be able to get a look that has a lot of textural quality. Subtle in many ways, like this is a subtle drawing in many ways, but there's still a richness in there that I had been unable to achieve before. And I thought it was pretty successful. So, just really quick, some of the details. I'm just going to pull up Illustrator. This is actually a file where I generated a lot of my lines, and you can see one of the first things here is just a bunch of lines here. And the colors don't really matter, right? The colors, I can adjust the colors all I want in Photoshop really easily, which is what I did. I don't remember why I have these browns on it. It happened to be whatever color was defaulting in, I think, when I opened the software. But this is not, this script right here was not unlike what generated those people. And I guess I'll pull it up right now. It's just random straight lines in all directions, right? The simplest form of that sort of randomness is here. You can do things, you can overlay certain colors. I put some random transparencies on it as well and blur it a little bit, and you start to get this effect. From there, I took it into Photoshop, and again, I changed the colors of each of those colors to whatever I needed at the time. I could play with certain effects and blurs and on all these other things. Similarly, you see sort of these straight lines sort of coming down like over here, or they're coming up over here. And it really is just the same script I used in this drawing to create these sort of background trees in the back. So it sort of has a jagged length and height like that. And so it's the same script. Yes, I did change, I think, the widths and the transparencies, and I overlaid a couple different colors on top of it. But I used that, brought that into Photoshop, was able to play with the colors and further transparency and effects and all of that. And then I don't think I used these, but I was just experimenting. It's the same elements, same scripts. It's just I did apply some effects in Illustrator, like zigzag and some other things for these other ones down here. And so when I just copy and paste this out and paste it into Photoshop, into what the original file is here. Now, I know I'm just open the JPEG version to keep things running smoothly here, but there's a ton of layers in my original Photoshop file. So I take that in and I play with the colors, I play with the effects, and I overlay them. And you can almost see things in here. You can see these striped vertical lines coming down. That is from that script of those lines coming straight down. And it's harder to see maybe in the water, but they're almost like horizontal looking, and it's really the same sort of script there. And like in the trees, it's very subtle, but there's color variation. That's more of that random angled orientation. You can almost see it here. And, hopefully you can see it on the screen, but there's like a subtle purple line sort of going off in that way, and another one coming down this way, and so on and so forth. So those were basically I created watercolor-like textures, but instead of using real watercolor or a picture from the internet, I created that texture from a set of random scripts in Illustrator. And then on top of that, things like the trees in the background, well, those are really just the same exact trees that I showed in here, and I think I show that effect in many other videos because that's pretty simple. I just brought it in and then overlaid this additional texture. This pine tree in the front here, I also have a video on a more complex pine tree. That's the same one there. I did interesting things like the siding, actually. Although it's brown, it is just the same fundamental script as what I used in the windows here, because I noticed that sort of could look like siding a little bit, and it has this overlay. If it were brown, it'd be sort of an overlay of like wood texture, just by transparency and line weight of the line itself. So for the architecture, sort of a little bit more of straight lines, a little more crisp in the color presentation, and then in the background and the water, a little more blurry, a little more watercolor-like in those textures. And so I think it came out pretty well. It was a fun exercise in how to use all my past techniques over the past couple of years into a holistic drawing. And in some ways, I think it is the most interesting of the set here. Certainly intellectually it is. That said, well, I like drawing this way because I don't really have great equipment for like drawing tablets. And I would argue that I don't have great hand skills anymore because I've been drawing in the computer for so long. I do wonder if it would have been any easier or quicker just to have done this with a stylus and a drawing tablet, like an iPad or something else. I think maybe it would have been easier. Maybe it would have been quicker, if not probably pretty similar to Timeline. And I would say if I were to do this again, maybe I would do that, or at least do a combination of like the pine trees. While I have those created the way that I have those objects set up, I can edit them and scale them, and they get randomized by themselves, and with no time on my effort, bring that in and reuse that. But things like the sky and the water, maybe, start a base with some of these older techniques I did, but on top of them, take a stylus and sort of sketch out some of this variation. May have been a quicker way, but nonetheless, this is more fun. And if you don't have a good hand, certainly it's sort of proof that you could do it all through digital techniques. But with that, I'll leave you to this drawing. Thanks for watching.